Hello, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We are back-to-back Dog National champions. You see that right there on the front of the desk. And how good does that look? Go for 2 in 22. The mission is complete. Georgia got to in 22. They are back-to-back national champions, Dog National champions, as we say around here. Man, what an exciting thing. So happy to have you on the program, presented by our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring on Terrence Edwards today. We're going to let him share his memories of the national championship. I'm starting to unpack some of the things that went on, after the game. I think a really strong and cool message from Kirby Smart here off the top of the program to begin things here today. We're going to have some fun at Florida's expense because we have time to do that in the midst of our celebration. We can also laugh at the lousy, stinking Gators. We'll do that. You got way too early top 25s out for next year. I like this stuff in general. It's obviously even more fun when you see Georgia at the top of those rankings for the next season already. So we're going to cover a lot of ground here, and it's really fun to be back in the studio to do all of that. So it's going to be a great day. I hope that you're continuing to enjoy your celebration and soaking all this up the way that all of us are. It's just a lot of fun. And these are the moments that one day we'll look back on and say, gosh, can you believe way back then we were having as much fun as we were having? Because right now we are having a blast. So what do you say we get ready to roll into it and have a good time back in the studio, the way we like to do it? Glad to have you with us as we do. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I begin the show by reporting some good news, at least on my end of things. Going to text my wife just a couple of seconds ago, or just after 10 a.m. in the morning, a couple of seconds ago, to let me know that she has secured her tickets for, now I'll be there in the press box, but she and my children, to go to the big national championship celebration on Saturday. I know everybody's kind of the same way today, trying to get online and get on there and get their tickets secured. So she told me that she was able to get hers, and these are just the same regular tickets that anybody else can get. So she was able to do that. That's all well taken care of. It is also great to be back in our normal studio situation today. I have brought back some props. I was showing this to our video audience before the show began today. So Dr. Pepper in L.A., their cans, now this is not an ad, this is just me just saying what we brought back here. So their cans in L.A. for the week had the special national championship logo on them. So as a way of kind of celebrating the back-to-back Dog National champions, thought I'd put the Dr. Pepper can next to our Coca-Cola bottle from last year here for a minute. I also stole a pillow out of the media lounge that has the L.A. National Championship deal on it. What I don't have yet is a scarf. Last year I wore the scarf from Indianapolis for like the whole year. I'd like to get my scarf eventually. I didn't have scarves in L.A., so we'll see if we can figure that out at some point in time. But, man, it feels good to be talking about being in Athens again on Saturday for a huge championship celebration, putting more national championship gear next to our old national championship gear. That's what it's all about when you go for 2 in 22, when you get that back-to-back Dog National Championship. We have a celebration to be ongoing for a long, long time as we appreciate all of this. We're going to try to do our part on that here on the show today. In fact, I want to start with this. So, to be honest with you, like the game ends, so late on Monday night. You kind of roll in and do the show on Tuesday morning, and then you're kind of off balance a little bit in terms of your typical routine of kind of consuming all the post-game, press conference and the content, kind of trying to find out what the Georgia coaches and players are having to say about the win they just had. And the travel part of this makes it more difficult too. So I would say that I'm only just now catching up on a lot of the stuff that happened after the game. And our DawgNation YouTube page, for me, has been a great resource on this. So many of the cool things from after that game, and including the glimpse of the celebrations and our post-game show and all that coverage. A lot of the places that you can go to get, one of the great places you can go to get a lot of this is right there on the DawgNation YouTube page. But also kind of watching some of the press conference stuff that's come out over the course of that I've been watching recently, but it came out like right after the game. One of the things that Kirby Smart said, like in the immediate aftermath of the game, I thought was a really valuable statement. It's directly to Georgia fans. And this is one of those things I think that can be maybe interpreted a couple of different ways. I think for me, there's one specific interpretation of all of this that I don't think you should miss. But these, I believe, are really wise words. And it's interesting to me that Smart says this almost like right off the top. This is from his opening statement from his national championship winning press conference there late Monday night, especially late if you're on the East Coast. Late on Monday night, Smart looks directly to the camera, speaks directly to fans, and the message that he delivers in the aftermath of having won another national championship is one that I don't think that DawgNation and UGA fans should miss. So let me let you hear Kirby this from Monday night.
I want to thank our fans for traveling all the way out here. I hope they understand the message I'm about to say. They can't take it for granted. You know, you can't take opportunities like this for granted, and they showed up in full force, and they better never get tired of it because we need them here. We need them to back us, and you can't become complacent as a fan, and we can't become complacent as coaches.
So let me tell you what I think that means. Now, there's a couple potential meanings for all of this, and on the one hand, like you're left to conclude, is that just some sort of subliminal message to start donating to NIL so we can keep winning these championships? Maybe there's a degree to which that's true. Of he's encouraging those fans to be a part of all of that. Obviously, he did talk in the Tuesday press conference about he knows it's expensive to come out to L.A., and he thanked Georgia fans for spending the money they did to come out and do that. And maybe there's a little bit of a subliminal message there of, hey, if you want to keep winning these championships, you're going to keep supporting us. I get all of that. And there's also kind of maybe a cousin to that idea of that when he says you can't get complacent, that means, hey, you got to turn the page already. You already got to start looking at what's going to happen next year. And Georgia's obviously hosting elite recruits this weekend for the trophy celebration. Georgia's, I think, on the road visiting recruits Friday. And there's work to be done managing the roster for next year. And so there's a way of interpreting what Kirby Smart says there, which is it's time to turn the page and it's time to start getting interested in what's happening next year, that the celebration of the national championship this year is already over. And I know that kind of sounds like when you use a word like complacency, that's kind of what Smart's suggesting. But for the fans, for you and for me, I truly don't think that's the case. I really don't. I think it's another part of the Kirby Smart message there that ought to mean the most to you, which is, hey, make sure you don't take this for granted. We heard Kirby Smart say that a moment ago. Make sure you don't take this for granted. And I think that has value in a couple of different ways here. I think it has value in terms of how it impacts the program from the standpoint that, if you really think about it, the fans' job is to create the atmosphere. And if you've ever walked into a crowded room, you can sort of tell, is this a happy room or a sad room or an angry room? People, when they get together, have a tendency to just sort of create an atmosphere. And you better believe that's true when it comes to the 90 or so thousand Georgia fans inside the stadium on Saturday, but the million or so Georgia fans kind of around the program that are always talking about it, tuning in to listen and watch shows like this. It's the atmosphere created by these fans that really, really matters. And I think that the atmosphere that's created by Georgia fans in the aftermath of all of this should be one of obvious celebration and obvious elation about the fact that Georgia has won a national championship. So the point I'm getting to here is that while Kirby and the coaches may have to get right back to work in terms of recruiting for the 2024 class or managing the roster from the standpoint of who's going on to the NFL or who might be transferring or who you might be bringing in, while the team itself sort of has to get back to work here, I think fans ought to be really, really slow in stopping the celebration. I think that you ought to keep this celebration going, in other words, as long as you possibly can. And for the most part, we sort of said the same thing last year too, that your job is to make this feel really fun. Because if you want this team, these coaches, these players to keep on winning these national championships, you want to create the kind of atmosphere where, man, they feel really glad to have done what they did. And so let me give you, sort of a specific, practical application for all of this. And I hate to admit this, but I do believe it's true. I think there were some fans last year that made a little bit of a mistake in the aftermath of last year's, Georgia National Championship win. I think they made a little bit of a mistake of turning the page a little too quick, and they got really worried in some cases about, Georgia may have won the national championship this year, but Alabama's going to be preseason number one next year, and whatever, and Georgia's not going to have as many guys on defense anymore. They're going to have more pressure on the offense, and whatever. There was this immediate pivot to negativity for some Georgia fans after last year's national championship. And obviously that was a mistake because Georgia went back and won the thing again. But even if that hadn't happened, it would have still been a mistake to turn the page too quickly from a moment that you had been dreaming about for your entire life finally happens. And the idea that you just quickly pivot to next year and, oh gosh, Georgia may have won it this year, but what about next year? I think that would have been a mistake, especially understanding that kind of came with a little bit of a negative bent to it. Well, here we are a year later, and I think you're going to have the opposite side of the same coin come up again. And I'm already seeing some of this, and I'm not criticizing the people who are saying this. I'm just saying that I think you got to be really careful with this. Obviously, we spent a lot of the time this year talking about go for 2 in 22. We're really proud of the fact that we kind of helped, usher in what ultimately became the narrative for Georgia this season, bringing home national championship number 2 in the Kirby Smart era. And you better believe we think there's a chance to go for 3 in 23. Obviously, we think that, and eventually we're going to get there. And eventually we're going to talk about Georgia's pursuit of something that's essentially never been done in college football before. We're, of course, fascinated by the idea of a three-peat, or of course we're, enamored by that. And eventually we're going to get there and talk about it. But much like last year, it would have been a mistake to move too quickly off the national championship and concern shit up at the 2022 team. I think it's also just as big a mistake to move too quickly off this national championship to the notion of 2023 with the belief, well, of course Georgia's going to win it next year. They've won the last 2. Of course they're going to win the national championship again in 2023. And listen, that may happen. That may be true. Georgia really might do it, as improbable as it seems. They really might do it. But to get too excited about the future too soon, I think, is not properly rewarding this team for what it did here right now. Now, that doesn't mean on this show we're not going to talk about roster movement and recruits who are coming in, or transfers that are going out, or guys that declare for the NFL draft, or maybe a couple of guys that decide not to declare for the NFL draft. Of course, we're going to talk about the business of Georgia football the way we always do. But for us, we're going to be very, very slow to move off of what has just happened. And as excited as we are about 2023, we're going to put some of that on hold a little bit, because what Georgia has done here to conclude 2022 is amazing. It is the stuff of legend. It is the stuff, look, I would say that last year's national championship for Georgia was the culmination of a dream that we had. But I don't think many of us even had a dream of Georgia's going to win back-to-back national championships. I think that a lot of us were like, boy, it'd be great to see Georgia back in the national championship picture again, going back years ago. That what's actually happened this year, though, has exceeded even those of us who are huge fans. It even exceeded our wildest dreams. So understanding that's happened, we're going to take Kirby Smart's advice here. We're not going to take this for granted. We're going to realize that this is an unprecedented level of success, not just for Georgia, but essentially every program in the history of college football. We're going to soak it in, and we're going to enjoy it. And we're going to watch how this team gets ready for 2023, but we're going to do that with the mindset of that the present tense has never been better than it is right now. And one day we'll look back on this time and say, man, we were really lucky to live through a special time. And when we do look back on ourselves living through this special time, we're going to have a smile on our face knowing that we soaked up every last moment of it. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. Happy to have you with us. No matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We start even earlier than that on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. On our, I'm getting my messaging confused. We are on 960 The Ref, but that's at noon every day. Our first and 15s at DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app. That's at 9:45 in the morning. We've already done that here today, and that's been really fun to do. You can tell I'm a little bit punchy after getting home very, very late last night. But I am very happy to be in the studio, very happy to be delivering the podcast as well on all the platforms the way we always do, and so thankful to our friends at Merriweather and Tharp for making it possible. I'll tell you a quick story. So Bob Tharp, the partner from Merriweather and Tharp, and his wife Ashley were at the game on Saturday, and I was going to try to catch up with them before the game because, just want to see some folks. And it's one of those things where I was like pouring down rain. There was not the whole idea, but there not really being any tailgating turned out to be true. The stadium was just dead. No atmosphere whatsoever, outside the stadium before the game. The weather was also not very good either. So I ended up going to the stadium pretty early. So I missed the Tharps prior to the game. And then it kind of got crazy during the game. I was working and doing some stuff like that. But Bob reached out to me and said, hey, BA, just make sure you get some confetti for me from that national championship celebration. So you better believe I scarfed up some confetti for the Tharps, and we'll be giving that to them. Our producer, Michael Carvel, I got him some confetti there as well. So I've tried to bring back as much confetti as I possibly could. But I just love the fact that great sponsors like our friends at Merriweather and Tharp, like the one request they had was, can you get some confetti off the field for the national championship celebration. So that's the least I can do for them because they've been with us for a long time. And I love our sponsors, Big Dog fans, who are as happy as anybody when Georgia wins the national championship. So just do me a favor. Hit them up online, theatlantadivorceteam.com, theatlantadivorceteam.com. They're your source for Georgia divorce. And I realize that it is a sharp contrast between being happy that Georgia won a national championship and thinking about the possibility of divorce here in 2023. I do realize that. But we also know that life kind of runs on parallel tracks, that the great things happen at the same time that challenging, tough things happen. And you may be as happy as anything that your favorite football team won the national championship, but concurrent to that, you may be dealing with a very tricky and challenging personal situation. You've tried to save your marriage, and at this point, you just realize that's not going to happen. And I hate that. I really do. But confronting that reality is the right thing for you to do. And confronting that reality with a strong advocate on your side is even better. And that's why I'm going to recommend that you hire Merriweather and Tharp. And obviously, you're going to want to learn more about them before you do. So they give you plenty of opportunities to do that, including a free initial consultation with one of their attorneys. So please find them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com. Have that conversation. Find out how they can explain to you how the law can be leveraged for your benefit on the things that matter most in a divorce situation, finances, relationship with children, things like that. So theatlantadivorceteam.com is the website for Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com. All right, we're going to have Terrence Edwards here in a moment. Looking forward to hearing Terrence's thoughts about the national championship. And I'm going to also ask Terrence about the fact that he almost got a member of the club. Brock Bowers, late in the year, makes that push towards 1,000 yards. And what does he finish? 50 or so yards shy of that after the game the other night. So that was fun. We'll talk to Terrence about that and everything else in the national championship. Prior to that, though, let's go around the doghouse, presented today by our friends at Serve Pro. And one of the things I think is really fascinating about Stetson Bennett, the career now we would obviously acknowledge belongs on the top shelf of any player that's ever been at Georgia. This is truly one of the most significant figures to ever come through Georgia football for any number of reasons. And we can talk about that. We will talk about that. All of that is obviously very, very relevant. But as I've told you before, I think for me, Bennett is as fun to cheer for as almost any Georgia player ever has been because of the fact that while he has been a participant in and a cultivator, creator of Georgia football history, he has also done that with an appreciation for the Georgia football history in the past. He told the story the other day at Media Day. I wish I had this to play for you, but I don't. He told the story at Media Day the other day about, not just when he was a kid, kind of living and dying with Georgia football, but he was talking about being in that 1 year he's at junior college, but the fact that he was devastated that Georgia lost the SEC championship that year. Now think about this. This is a guy who's playing college football, had essentially been, I don't want to say, kicked off the team, but he, sort of realized that his best chance for playing was going to be to go somewhere else. And even after that, he is still sitting in a junior college somewhere, living and dying with Georgia football while they're in the SEC championship for the year that he was gone. This is a guy that has loved Georgia football, has been a student of Georgia football history, and now he's a part of Georgia football history. I just think that's an amazing thing to root for when it comes to Bennett's overall story. And in the post-game press conference the other night, he was actually asked about the fact that, hey, how do you feel to be considered the greatest quarterback in Georgia football history? And as I said before, given the fact that Bennett knows so much of that history so well, as you might imagine, he had a very good answer to that. This is Stetson from after the game on Monday night.
There's so many different variables that go in, scheme, players around you. I've been with Monk for 3 years. We brought back pretty much the entire core of our offense from last year, so we were all clicking. So, I don't know. We had a really good offense. It makes me proud, of what I've accomplished when I hear that, because it means I've done some things right, but I don't know if it's accurate or not. We've had I grew up watching Murray and Stafford and, Shock and Green and who's to say? Those dudes were all, amazing.
So here's what I can tell you from my own personal opinion on this. Aaron Murray said this last year that he thought that Stetson Bennett was now the best quarterback in Georgia football history. And at that particular time, that sort of seemed like too much too soon for me. Obviously, Murray saying that carries some weight because Murray would have been considered one of those guys too. But for me, I want to go back to the era of Eric Zier, who I still think his numbers hold up very well after all these years with what he did in the 90s. And then as what Stetson Bennett said, guys like David Green, who we've obviously been a big fan of, DJ Shockley, we've obviously been a big fan of. There, Matthew Stafford, there are a lot of names you can consider here. And yet, if that was premature to say that last season, I don't think that's premature to say that anymore. I think that Stetson Bennett clearly, without a doubt, is the best quarterback in Georgia football history. This is a program that's been playing since 1892. This is a program that's had success, not back-to-back national championship success, but they have had success over the years, and yet clearly on the basis of what Bennett has now done, and really it's the performances in the big games that probably cements this forever for him. On the basis of this, I think this is no longer a discussion. Now, there are other discussions to be had about, well, how does he compare to, other players at other positions, obviously such as Herschel Walker, and that may be the kind of thing where different people think different things. But I think the most clear-cut evaluation of the Bennett legacy right now is, of course, he's the best quarterback this program has ever had. Of course, he's the most accomplished. Of course, he stands as the most significant figure there. So, in light of everything that's going on here in the aftermath of Georgia winning the second national championship, giving the proper consideration to what Bennett has become, I do think is a big part of this. And I think that Bennett's really good at telling his own story about that because he understands, exactly what has had to happen for him to get to this point, the kinds of names that he'll be compared to and the fact that he now compares favorably to them is really a remarkable story. Now, one of the things I'm going to tell you, and I don't want to do this now because I want to do this tomorrow, I think it's also really interesting about how the Bennett story has evolved here. It's almost like people are making a very big deal about his age suddenly all of a sudden. It's like he went from being, in the eyes of some, not good enough to play to now he's so good that it's unfair because he's 25. But I think a lot of this sort of speaks to a larger narrative that's starting to form around Georgia. I don't think you should miss that. I want to save that. We're going to do that tomorrow. For now, though, it's just fun to hear a guy like Stetson understand the history of this. He knows the names that he's compared to alongside. And I think he's also, justifiably so, aware of the fact that his accomplishments being such a big part of these back-to-back national champions, that his achievements within these two seasons gives him a right to be thought of this way, that when we look back on Georgia football many, many decades from now, the Bennett career will be one of the things that we look on in this. And it's kind of gone from being, it's always sort of been a good story. And now it's more than just a good story. It's actually a phenomenal career, regardless of how it started, regardless of the improbable way that it came together. It's now just a really good and special career, and it is worth celebrating. And as we continue to enjoy this back-to-back Dog National Champions, the notion of go for two in 22, we will do so with the full awareness of just how much of this Bennett made possible by how well he played when Georgia really needed the biggest performance he could give. So that is Around the Doghouse, and it's presented today by our friends at ServPro. Happy to have them a part of the program, and happy to have them a part of what we've been going through this year. We had a little bit of a studio. It's funny, I walked in today, had not been here in several days, and the area around our studio was decorated so pretty. You had the Georgia balloons and Georgia State. Like, the whole place was sort of decorated like a tailgate party. It looked awesome. And it also kind of reminded me that a few months ago, this place was in disarray after we had a water leak here, and obviously some of you kind of dealt with the same kind of thing. You've got water damage or fire damage or something that needs to be cleaned up. Well, that's where the restoration specialists from our friends at ServPro come in here, because they can get it fixed for you, get it taken care of, and literally leave it like it never even happened. I love the video we show here because it's like a whole army of folks and equipment, all kinds of great things, do great work. But the ServPro folks are just about that. They're about the cleanup. They're about the restoration. They're about doing for you, which is what you really want if you're in kind of the midst of a messy situation. You want it all put back and all fixed up and almost like it never even happened. Well, that's what our friends at ServPro are all about there. Franchises are also all independently owned and operated, which means you're doing business with someone who's got a great stake in the outcome just like you do. So if you find yourself in need of something like this, my invitation to you is to check out our friends at ServPro right now. You can find them online at servpro.com. That's SERV, servpro.com. You can find them online for more of that. Of course, we're happy to have ServPro delivering Around the Doghouse to us here today. All right, so I did a whole thing a minute ago about, hey, staying in the moment and appreciating what Georgia's got going on right now, basking in the glow of a second straight national championship. And before the show's done, I'm going to be a total hypocrite because I'm also going to talk to you about the fact that in a lot of these way too early top 25s that are coming out already, Georgia is, of course, as you might expect, number one. So we'll have some fun with that idea, at least a little bit, that Georgia next year expects to be right back where they are this year. So we'll do some of that before we're done on the program today. But for now, memories from L.A., what it felt like to see this national championship be brought home, and exactly how it all came together. Great guy to talk to all of that about is our buddy Terrence Edwards. So let's do that right now here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
Let's take a look around the
That's
rest of
not
the
the
league.
music.
This is SEC.
All right, we'll dispense with the music. Oh, okay.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
All right, great stuff to welcome on Terrence Edwards to the program here today, a couple of days after Georgia brings home that second straight national championship. Terrence, I know you love this team, your alma mater. I know you're proud of what they were able to do. When you look back on that national championship game, this national championship season, what will your biggest memories from it all be?
I always say this, BA, and I'm going to go back to one play that I think kind of put this season in perspective. And it's a play from a true freshman. It was the Missouri game when their running back broke out and Cox Enterprises chased him down and tackled him like on a 4 or 5 yard line. And they kicked the field goal instead of getting 7 points. And that play alone kind of emphasized for me what this team was going to be. They didn't quit. They didn't give up. When things was not looking the greatest, they still had the confidence and the swagger that they was going to win. And that one single play, to me, kind of sums up this whole season and kind of catapulted us to this national championship. Because if we lose against Missouri, I don't know if we could really get back in it. I think we would because we could win the SEC, but that one play alone that I think about, that just kind of, man, that one play captured a 15-0 national champ, back-to-back national champ season.
I think that's exactly right, and it's one of those things. This is why we love college football, Terrence, is that so much of this is unpredictable. That we knew that Georgia was in the midst of having a shot at a national championship, and we also knew this season that, hey, at some point in time they're going to be tested. And obviously Missouri's not among the better teams that Georgia played, but listen, in college football, strange things happen all the time, and Georgia got a big test from a team on the road that day. Was it because Georgia wasn't fully focused on the game or whatever else? I guess we'll never really be able to know that for sure. But that is one of the moments, Terrence. You're exactly right about that, where Georgia had to kind of dig deep, find something in itself, make that play late to give itself a chance to come back and get the win. And when they needed to be good at the end of that game, they found a way to do that and preserving the chance at a 15-0 perfect season. It's just really amazing how a game that really no one had circled prior to the game ended up being one of the building blocks that turned into this national championship season.
Oh, most definitely. That lets you know the heart of a champion when anyone could have gave up, let alone a true freshman, Malachi Starks. He, 18-year-old, the guy was out. He did not give up. You always say, finish the drill, as Coach Tripp would say. He chased the guy down, tackled him inside the 5, and we held them to a field goal. And those 4 points was a big difference in that game. And those 4 points, let's just call it what it is, that preserved a undefeated season. And, I give kudos to Malachi. I give kudos to the coaching staff. I give kudos to the culture that Kirby has built, that you're going to play every play to it. You don't have any more plays to play. And that one play just really emphasized to me the Georgia season.
So one of the other things that played out during the game on Monday night that obviously made me think about you was the fact that Brock Bowers almost got to that 1,000-yard season. And I mean, look, I think it speaks to how great of a player Brock Bowers is, and obviously just the ability of this Georgia offense to cultivate the kind of star power and playmaking abilities and maybe ways that previous Georgia offenses might not quite have been able to do. I know you were talking about this a little bit on Twitter. You almost got a member of the club with you, and maybe next year Brock Bowers comes back and actually does it. How much can you say about him as a player, and how cool would it be to eventually have a guy like that actually join you in that 1,000-yard club?
I always said, I jokingly tell people this all the time that, I don't want my records to be broken. I'm half-hearted joking, but I would love for Brock, man, because he's a fantastic player, and I was, reading the Twitter, my timeline on Twitter throughout the game, and it was brought to my attention that he was 70 yards, and he was 52 yards. So I was actually really pulling for Brock because he's such a fantastic player. And it's a shame that he has to come back to Georgia for another year. And I know people like, we need him next year, but it's a shame that his talent has to come back to Georgia next year and play one more year because he is that type of kid that he's NFL ready right now. And I'm happy that we get him back for another year, and he's going to be the type player that is going to be able to push for that 1,000 yards, and rightfully so because he's a fantastic player.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things here on that. You mentioned that in a lot of ways he's maybe already NFL ready right now, and I guess maybe this is one of those good things about NIL is the fact that Bowers is already, I think, pretty well paid from NIL standpoint. I would say the next year has an opportunity to cash in even more, and so for a guy that obviously one day will make millions of dollars we expect in the NFL, to have a chance to kind of cash in a big way for one more year here at Georgia before that college career is done, that at least sort of speaks to the opportunity that does exist right now for a guy who maybe he is ready for the NFL here at this moment. But going ahead and getting paid at Georgia right now like he's in the NFL, maybe that's one of the good ways in which NIL can be leveraged here right now.
Yes, and I think this is, in my opinion, what the NIL was brought into play for. These type of opportunities. Brock Bowers cannot leave and go to the NFL and pursue a dream. And this is what the name, like, image was created for, not for the recruitment part of it, but for guys like Brock who deserve the opportunity to go out and make money off his name, likeness, and image. This is what it created for, and this is what I support. I don't support the way it's being used with just trying to buy all the best players. I fully support guys like Brock and Javon Butler, all the guys who earned the right to take full advantage of their name, likeness, image.
And I guess let me ask you one more thing on this topic before we shift gears here to something else. Like, what do you make of the way in which that the tight end position's kind of been redefined at Georgia? Because, I mean, a guy like Bowers, I mean, listen, Terrence, I'm going to tell you right now, there's not a single pass catcher in college football in either of the last 2 years that I would have taken over Bowers. That I think people kind of misunderstand the fact that I truly believe that Bowers in that same class with the Marvin Harrison Jr., the guys that Alabama would have had last year. And it sort of seems like, well, tight end really shouldn't be that way. But when you see the way in which that he produces, when you see the way in which that he's able to cultivate productivity, that I mean, to me, I think the numbers sort of speak for themselves. Is this about Brock Bowers just being sort of a special player? Is this about the fact that the Georgia offense just is able to magnify skill sets in a way that maybe other offenses just can't? Like, how do you explain the fact that Georgia's able to get so much out of a guy like that? Because I think that's one of the real stories of this season is the fact that Todd Monken, man, just pushes all the right buttons when it comes to using these tight ends.
Right. I think, Brock is a special player. There's not a lot of tight ends that possess the same skill set that he has. He's a capable inline blocker, but his skill set is being able to catch the football at a high rate. And maybe in 2 years, I've maybe seen one drop from Brock. He catches the ball at a consistent rate. He runs well. He does not run like a 230, 40-pound tight end. He runs like a wide receiver. So he possesses skill sets that's advantageous for defenses because you put a linebacker on him, he's just too fast for them. You put a safety on him, he's just too big for that. So it is Brock, and I think, and I tweeted this, and I want to give Big O a shout-out to as well because in his own way, he's just as important as Brock. Brock may be the headliner, but when Big O went out in the Ohio State game, I know all the Ohio State fans and everyone wants to point out that Marvin Harrison went out the game, but for us, that make our offense goals, running and passing. Brock Big O is just as important as Marvin Harrison Jr. And when he went out, our offense kind of changed a little bit. Oscar is going to get to the point where he's going to be the next man up, and Oscar is fantastic, but Oscar not yet can do the things in the run game and the blocking game that Big O does. So we want to give Brock all the praise and adulation, and he deserves it. But for me, Big O needs just as much as he does.
No, I think that's a really good point about Darnell Washington from the standpoint that if you really think about the team concept, so much of what Georgia has used to win the national championship is the idea that the team is bigger than any individual player. I don't know that anybody embodies that better than Washington does. And one of the reasons why Kirby Smart compliments him and praises him all the time, because I really do think that Washington stands as more than just being a good player. I think he represents what they want Georgia football to be about, because this is a guy that's a former 5-star and obviously had aspirations for being a great skill player and catching the ball a lot. And then this year, I think he did become pretty valuable with the ball in his hands and caught some big balls here for Georgia. But beyond that, it was probably the best blocker on the team and an absolute weapon in terms of creating everything this Georgia offense was able to do. And he did it really kind of in a selfless way. And Kirby even said for the national championship game that they probably leaned on his blocking more so than his catch. He did have one really nice catch, but he was kind of used more as a blocker in a game like this. And yet Washington, the entire weekend, has this huge smile on his face. He's obviously trying to, to give it a go and play the best that he can, being injured the way that he was. But Terrence, I just think that Washington just probably embodies the team concept here, maybe better than anybody else in this team, and certainly Kirby Smart will acknowledge that at every point.
Yes, most definitely. I mean, he definitely embodies the culture of Georgia, and this just goes to show that he was not the most targeted tight end, but his game is going to translate into the NFL because he's able to catch passes and he's also a capable blocker. A lot of teams that run 12 personnel, when you don't want to sub an offensive lineman in, Big O is an offensive lineman that is a tight end. So the only thing that I had about Big O is coming to this season was the ability to stay healthy, and he did that. He showed he could play every game. Unfortunately, he got hurt in that Ohio State game, and he's able to come back and play well. I mean, if you saw the one play when Brock caught a screen, I think it was, a flat pattern, and Big O was blocking and defending. It was like they was playing patty cake because Big O was going forward, and the defensive back was trying to get off, and he just couldn't. So I just think Big O has really earned right to be talked about. I really think he's earned the right. So I'm pretty sure he's going to forego and enter the NFL draft. I think he's played his way into a early round draft pick, and he deserves everything that's coming to him.
Let me finish with this. We've talked so much about Georgia winning the game. How about the fact they won it 65-7? You're a missed PAT and like one busted play defensively away from winning the game 66-0. I mean, Terrence, have you ever seen domination in a football game like that of any level? Forget the fact that it's a national championship. That'd be an amazing blowout for a homecoming game. I mean, how about the fact that Georgia beat a 13-1 team 65-7? That's insane to me.
Right, and the only other game that I could think about it was, high school this year. Mill Creek put up 70 points on Carrollton in the state championship game, and we all know what we think of Julian Lewis and Joey King, what type of program Carrollton has. So, but other than that, I would never imagine teams putting up that type of points. And you just think about it. If we do not blow that coverage with Keeley and Jovan, they might not score a point in that game. So just think about that. The defense played well. I just think about Jovan. I'm kind of biased with him because he's from my area. He's from Millersville. I'm from Washington County. Our two towns are separated by 20 minutes. So I've heard about the young man for a long time, and we just got to get away from the recruiting rankings and I know that's a big thing, but some of the better players in Georgia's history are some of the low-level 3-star, 2-star players, and that kid is an absolute baller. So when Kirby and company do sign a player late or sign a player that nobody wants, we got to trust him. Lad McConkey, we got to trust it. Javon, Jordan Davis, I could go on and on. Thomas Davis, we got to be able to trust the evaluations of these coaches because now everyone loves the kid, and when it comes to having the recruiting services tell you the kid is a 3-star, go look at this film. That's what I do. I go look at the kid's film and look at his traits. And Javon Abala is a baller, and think about it, he's the defensive MVP for 2 straight games.
Well, since you bring him up, I'll respond to that there as well, Terrence. I think it's been fun to watch the way in which his career's evolved, and I've said this now a few times. Like at one point in time, you would have noticed him on the field, and you'd be like, "Wow, this guy's kind of an unsung hero. This is a guy that's providing Georgia more than we realize." And all of a sudden, now at the end of the year, you're saying this is one of the best players in college football, and he comes back next season as one of the faces of this Georgia program. And I think he should be one of the most recognized players in the game because, as you mentioned, the fact that he's had so many big performances on these kind of MVP stage type situations. Javon Bullard is now. I mean, he's now on the top shelf of players in this Georgia program. That's an amazing evolution.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, you just think about a lot of players on the defense. I think he's gonna take the mantle from Chris Smith as especially the secondary leader.
Yeah.
We all know Chris Smith was the secondary leader. I think now he's probably going to take that leadership role because of his play. His play dictates that he, just maturated to that person now. I love his game. I'm a little biased to the kids that come from the Miller, Georgia area with Kiera's. I think Kiera's a text. I don't think he minds me sharing this. I think Kiera's a text the other day. I actually FaceTimed. He didn't answer my phone call. And I told him, I said, I'm mad at you because you didn't answer because I just want to tell you in person that I just respect you so much of a kid that didn't complain.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a big year, the COVID year, came back and got hurt, didn't play as much as he probably wanted to, and just go out and make big catches. And I just wanted to tell him just to his face, man, I just respect you so much because you could have dipped and went to other places, but you made a legacy at Georgia that even me, as somebody who's considered the greatest receiver in Georgia's history, you got something that I wish I had, and that's one national champion. You got two. So I called and tell him that, and we did talk through text, and just guys like that just embodied the culture that Kirby has set that I just love to watch.
No, I think that's really well said, Terrence. I absolutely do. And by the way, I know, speaking of working hard, here in this month of January, the bubble work is getting back going. Receivers at that next who at the high school level who want to take that step towards the next level, this is the time when a lot of that happens. So remind folks how they can get in touch with Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy and learn some of those skills that obviously made you the only 1,000-yard receiver to this point in time in Georgia football history. How can they get in touch with you?
Well, last night was the first night we kicked it off. We were supposed to start Monday, but I had to cancel. There's no way that I was going to miss the national championship game, so we canceled it Monday. So we got started, Ron Billy, now. So if you want your son to, even with the quarterbacks or receivers or tight ends or running backs who just want to become better pass catchers, you can reach out to me on all social media platforms at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, great stuff. Thanks for being here. We'll look forward to talking to you soon as Georgia wins 2 national championships. It's an amazing thing, and we'll have plenty more time to talk about all the great moments from this. So thanks for being a part of the program today.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Love talking to Terrence Edwards in a day like this. So much fun to hear his perspective on everything with these Georgia Bulldogs. Awesome thing. We're going to get ready to transition now to cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. As we do, I have a very important announcement to give to you. I have been told that I'm only going to be able to promote the DawgNation cruise, I think, for a few more days. Because as it stands right now, we are getting very, very close. I told you we released a few more rooms, and those have now been scarfed up. We're going to try to get access to a few more, but we are down to the absolute, last staterooms that we can book to be a part of the DawgNation cruise. The cruise ship itself is going to be full, first of all. And then second of all, the special, DawgNation events, there's only so much space that we can kind of have for that. So we are getting down to the absolute last. And we got 50 phone calls within the last whatever. And so those people are kind of in the midst of kind of getting their stuff booked. So literally it is a race to get these final staterooms booked here. So here's what I'm telling you. If you're hearing my voice right now, you probably still have time to get in. But it is time to get it booked. It's time to get it locked in because when the next however long, maybe it lasts for a couple more days, but for the next, it's about to be completely sold out. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to the website, royaldogs.com. This is the website to understand there for this because there's maybe been some confusion on that, but royaldogs.com is the website. It's the one created by Jessica Slater, great travel agent who's been helping us out the entire time. She's been answering the phones left and right. People just flooding in here because they want to be a part of this championship celebration we're going to have in April on this. So you can call Jessica directly, 770-718-9147, 770-718-9147. But my point here is if you've been on the fence about going, I don't want you to miss it. So get on right now, get it booked, get it finalized, because within the next couple of days, may not be tomorrow, may not be Monday, but within the next couple of days, they're going to come to me and say, BA, you can't promote this anymore because it is now full. So I don't want you to have that FOMO, that fear of missing out, or the fear that you did miss out. I don't want you to miss out. In other words, I want you to be with us. So we're leaving Port Canaveral April 24th. We're going to Nassau in the Bahamas. Perfect Day Coco Cay. I mean, first of all, Perfect Day Coco Cay in its own right is an amazing getaway. But in addition to all the fun stuff that you do on board any Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, we have some special Dog Nation themed events as well. And it's going to be bigger than ever before. So I want you to be on board. If you got a question about it, reach out to me directly. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, I'll kind of try to help you out with that. But really, Jessica's the one to talk to because she's the one that knows everything. So call her, get going. Let's get it done. Let's have a great time. We had a national championship celebration unlike anything ever before last year's cruise, and this year's cruise is going to be even bigger. We want you on board, and your time to get booked up and be a part of it is about to run out. So make sure you do that right now. We'll see you there for that. The second ever cruise with Dog Nation coming up in April on board Independence of the Seas. I literally cannot wait for it. All right, I want to get ready to go cruise around the SEC here for a moment, kind of talking to you about some of the really cool stuff that's ongoing here right now. I want to start with this. And obviously, Georgia's got so many fun things going on right now, celebrating back-to-back Dog National champions, go for 2 in 22, the mission complete. Georgia got 2 in 22. But just in the midst of all of that, that does not mean we still don't have a little bit of time to make fun of those lousy, stinking Gators, and so that's exactly what we're going to do right now. Prized signee from the class of 2023 for Florida, Jaden Rashada, has not yet arrived with the Gators. He's not yet enrolled at school, and he has until Friday to do this. Now, all of this is kind of a fast-moving situation, so by the time you hear this, maybe some of the facts have changed a little bit. But as of press time, as they say in the industry, as of press time, Rashada had not yet enrolled at Florida, and if he wants to be a part of Florida spring practice, he's got to do that prior to Friday. Now, let me see if I can kind of walk through all of kind of what's been supposed to go on here. There had been some reporting, I think On3 had this, that's a recruiting website. On3 had reported that Rashada had asked to be released from his letter of intent. Well, Rashada's father has since told 24/7 Sports that, well, no, we have not asked to be released from the letter of intent. So there's a little bit of a dispute there about whether or not Rashada wants out of his LOI or not. What is not seemingly in dispute, though, is the fact that all of this is related to the NIL, the money that Rashada was supposed to get to come to Florida. Edgar Thompson, Orlando Sentinel, has reported it's like an astronomical figure. I forget exactly what he was saying it was, but somewhere in the neighborhood of like $13 million, something like that supposedly Florida has promised Rashada, and thus far those promises apparently have not been kept. And so that's what led Rashada to the frustration of, maybe not wanting to go there, that no one, even though there's some dispute about whether or not he's asked out of the letter of intent and kind of how that's playing out, what no one disputes is that Rashada's lack of arrival at Florida as of yet is NIL related. Pretty clearly, he's not getting the money so far that he was promised to get, which is hilarious. Obviously, it sort of speaks to Florida's desperation that they're paying this much money for a quarterback recruit. They have no idea if he's going to be any good or not. I mean, obviously, he was a prized signee, and you had to battle Miami to get him. But this just sort of reeks of desperation, throwing this amount of money around to get a guy like this. I mean, you're getting close to NFL first-round draft pick type money in a situation like that, and that's for a far more proven commodity than what this is. So it kind of reeks of desperation for Florida, which is obviously kind of hilarious. And Billy Napier literally having nothing to show for his first year on the job at Florida is also kind of funny as well. We can all laugh about that. But in the midst of laughing about all this, I do think there's another kind of important message to consider here too. And when you hear us say this all the time, is that in the universe of stories but NIL, and I want you to pay attention to this for yourself because this is really important for how the future is going to play out, and this relates to Georgia too. In the universe of NIL stories, like 99.9999% of these stories are about the demand for NIL. Players who want the money, programs who want to use money to secure these players. It's about NIL demand. But for every 100 stories you see or read or hear about NIL demand, you see like one story about NIL supply. And obviously in the economy of the NIL, like anything else, you're going to have supply and demand. And right now there is no shortage of demand, but the supply is just limited. Let me give you an example of what NIL supply would be. This is a guy like, say, John Ruiz at Miami. This is a guy who openly brags about spending the money to bring in the players and things like that. But that's NIL supply. That's the supply of money that brings in the players. And even he said he can't do this forever. But that's an example of NIL supply. But what you have here at Florida is you clearly have a demand to use money to pay players, and you clearly have a demand on the part of the player to get that money. If he can get that money, he's coming to Florida. But it sounds like you just can't create the supply. And y'all, there is way more of this going on than people realize. It is just not that easy to raise this money. So programs can go out there and promise this, they can promise that, they can, they can agree to these astronomical, exorbitant NIL deals. But then if you have to turn around and go out and raise the money, it is just not a given you're going to be able to do that. And we see countless examples of this. The other day, this is a different situation because this is a coaching thing. But like the Colorado AD talking about the money they paid Deion Sanders to come to Boulder, and he admitted, we haven't raised this money yet, but we were going to. Like there's more of this going on in college athletics than you realize of, hey, we have to make a big promise financially to get something, whether it be a high-profile coach like Deion or a high-profile player like a quarterback recruit here. We have to make a big promise financially to do that, and then once we agree upon the figure, then we'll go out and raise the money. But it's just not – if you get to one of these huge financial sums, it's just not that easy to raise that money. And – I mean, people don't realize when you hear so-and-so's NIL collective's worth $11 million or $14 million or however much it's worth, how much money they have. Like a huge portion of that is pledged money. It's not actual cash in hand. It's pledged money. And for anybody who's ever contributed like your building campaign at your church, I think you understand there's a big difference between the money you pledge and the money you actually give. And often cases, that's true. In the case of all of this, that's true there as well. So my point here is we're going to laugh at Florida if they do lose out on Rashada, or the fact that they're having a hard time even securing Rashada is really pretty funny. But the Florida story here is actually going to be a little bit more of, I think, a common occurrence, or at least it's going to be a harbinger for things that other programs are going to deal with, because some of these big NIL promises they've made, now they've got to keep those promises, and it's just not easy to raise that money. There are just not as many sources of NIL cash as there are demand for the theoretical cash. And that's a deal. That's a story. That's worth paying attention to. It's Florida right now, but it may be somebody else here very, very soon. It likely will be. All right, so for as long as I've been around, I have always loved way too early top 25s. Every outlet puts them out. It's fun to kind of race the clock and get it out either just before the national championship game or just after the national championship game. The thought here is the teams that weren't very good this year like the idea of maybe being very good next year, and so it's sort of that hope springs eternal thing. But around here, we've also always loved the offseason. We love projecting the future year, and it's way more fun to do that now than it's ever been before because of how high Georgia is projected on the heels of winning back-to-back Dog National champions. Go for 2 in 22, turning into at some point go for 3 in 23. Yeah, we get all of that, but it's still just sort of fun to think about what the next year is going to be. And past the time, it always feels like it takes so long to get to the season. But kind of past the time, having those discussions about who's going to be good and who's going to be what, and it's just kind of a fun thing to do. So with that in mind, I'm going to read to you a little bit here from the ESPN Way Too Early Top 25. They always do a fun one. Mark Schleybaugh is the guy that typically does that. It's fun to see Georgia, boom, at number 1 here on this. I guess I'll give you one thought on this, and we'll do plenty more on this in the future. The one thing I want you to all be really careful about, though, is that while Georgia is rightly so preseason number 1 for next season, just be careful assuming it's going to be easy for Georgia, even though on paper it all seems like it should be. The schedule's easy. We'll have more on that in a moment. Georgia's track record for success makes predicting future success seemingly easy there as well. But who was preseason number 1 a year ago? It was Alabama. That seemed easy, too, in the eyes of a lot of people. And somehow, some way, college football has a way of making what seems like it should be easy actually look a little bit more difficult than it is. That is not the same thing as saying that Georgia's somehow not going to win the national championship. I'm not ready yet to make a prediction about that one way or another. But what I will tell you is a lifetime of following the sport has led me to understand that college football is very easy to project, but actually pretty difficult to predict. Meaning, it's very easy on paper to say who should be number one, but what actually is going to happen is never quite so easy to predict as the projection sometimes might suggest. So there will be some mystery moments for Georgia over the course of the next 12 months, getting back to where they were this year in the college football playoff. There will be some unexpected adversity, the same way the Missouri game was a few months ago. Some other moment will be in the next calendar year that leads to that. And now, it may all result in Georgia winning the national championship once again, might. But just be careful assuming it's going to be any easier for Georgia as the preseason number one than it has been for a lot of these other preseason number ones at this point in the year and previous years there as well. So Georgia is number one. Ohio State's at number two. Ohio State obviously has the big changeover when it comes to C.J. Stroud, but honestly, I'm not that surprised to see the Buckeyes at number two on the list. Michigan here is at number three, and I think being a Michigan fan right now is a very weird thing. You've been in the playoff 2 years in a row. That's obviously a very good thing, but almost everything else as it relates to the program feels maybe quite not so good, even though you've beaten your hated rival Ohio State now 2 years in a row. Jim Harbaugh is openly flirting with going to the NFL. Seems like he'd like to do that if he gets the right kind of offer that he wants to come his way. You were embarrassed by Georgia in the 2021 college football playoff. You lost to a team in this year's playoff that went on to lose the national championship game 65-7. So Michigan's preseason number three. But honestly, do they feel close to a national championship? I mean, it's weird. It's like you can't be much closer by perception to what Michigan is right now, and yet in actuality, doesn't it feel like they're a long way away from actually winning a national championship? That may be ultimately why a guy like Harbaugh is looking to move on. I think it's really weird how the last few weeks have played out. In other words, prior to the playoff, I think Michigan had mega bragging rights against Ohio State. But given the way the playoff played out, the fact that Ohio State played Georgia really tough and close, the fact that Michigan lost to a team that went on to humiliate itself in the national championship, I'm not really quite so sure how much of a platform Michigan fans have to talk down to Ohio State, how much gravitas their trash talk kind of has right now. Yeah, they won head-to-head, but it's not like the program feels like it's on better footing right now than Ohio State is. So college football has a way of changing pretty quickly. One of the teams is going to be one of the most buzzed about during the offseason is going to be Florida State. Obviously, they spent most of the year as a really pretty good team, got the win against LSU to begin the year, and they're going to be preseason number 4, according to Schleybaugh here. One of the main things they bring back, of course, is their quarterback. So, that's Jordan Travis coming back is a big deal for them. So that's a team that's probably going to get more preseason buzz than any non-Clemson ACC team has got in quite some time. Then you got Alabama at number 5. We'll go through the rest of these maybe tomorrow. Here's what I'm going to tell you about Alabama. They're not relevant to me at all right now. And I'm not saying they're not going to be good this upcoming season. They very well might. Alabama typically is pretty good. But this notion that somehow the aftermath of this year's national championship should be seen through the lens of Alabama, I'm sorry, that's just ludicrous. The notion of, David Pollack made Nick Saban mad on TV. Now you done gone and done it. Nick Saban's going to want his revenge. He wanted his revenge last year, and he was nowhere to be found in the college football playoff. Like this notion that everybody tiptoes around Alabama, it's just not true anymore. Preseason number 5, maybe they'll finish better than that. Maybe they'll finish worse than that. They lost 2 regular season games this year. Maybe they'll lose more than that next year. It's certainly a possibility. But as it stands right now, Alabama is just not a relevant part of the discussion. Frankly, they're not much more relevant in the current college football conversation than a team like Clemson is, because Clemson also has made a million college football playoffs, but they didn't make this year's playoff. That's sort of the way in which Alabama is right now, a team that's been in the college football playoff a lot, but they weren't there this year. Maybe they'll get back next year. But honestly, I'm not going to spend the entire offseason thinking about what Alabama's doing. Now, I'll make fun of them from time to time because I think they have, a lot of desperate fans trying to cling on to, what used to make them famous. I think they're trying to hold on to that with every fiber that they have. But in terms of, somehow Georgia's second straight national championship being some sort of referendum on Alabama one way or another, and Alabama should have been in the game or whatever else. If you think you should have been in the game, my advice to you would have been don't lose twice. I mean, that would be the simplest path to get a chance to prove what you're all about in the college football playoff. Don't lose twice. But Alabama obviously did do that. So they're number 5 here in this way too early top 25. And that seems about right. And frankly, they could be better than that. They could be worse than that. But we're not going to spend all off season worrying about Alabama because as it stands right now, they are just not all that relevant. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. We've had a great run here on Go for 2 in 22. We've had a great collection of sponsors who've helped make all that possible. And I want to give a shout out to one of those right now, our friends at Marlowe's Tavern, because obviously I remember when we started the month of December, rolling into the SEC championship and then going into all the things that came after that, to get all of Dog Nation in that one room that day and just sort of celebrate what was going to be with the dream of actually go for 2-22 and winning that second straight national championship. Well, as it turns out, it has worked out exactly that way. So big thanks to Marlowe's Tavern for making that possible. You can find Marlowe's Tavern online at marlowstavern.com. And when you go there, I want you to sign up for being a part of the Insiders Club. And when you become a Marlowe's Tavern Insider, you're going to get some great features and benefits for signing up. You get cool stuff on your birthday, but you also get a sort of a special thank you just for signing up. You're going to get $10 off a $30 order just for becoming a member of the Marlowe's Tavern Insider Club. And after that, you're going to earn what's called qualified visits, which means when you spend $15 inside a Marlowe's Tavern, you'll get that qualified visit. And when you have 4 qualified visits, you're going to get a complimentary entree up to $20 off your next visit there as well. So it's just one of the ways in which Marlowe's Tavern wants to reward you for being a part of what they're doing with the chef-inspired food and the craft cocktails and all the great stuff that Marlowe's Tavern is famous for. So find them online, marlowstavern.com, and you can become a member of the Marlowe's Tavern Insiders Club. I'll also give a shout-out to our friends at 7-6 Apparel there as well. They're the ones that made the Go for 2 and 22 T-shirts, and they've got so many great things they've got going on there as well in terms of the national championship celebration, stuff like that. You can go to the 76.com to find out more about that. The 76.com, you can see the cool special stuff they've made from the national championship. And obviously when you go and see our Go for 2 shirts and things like that, that came from our friends at 7-6 Apparel there as well. So you can check them out. It's actually spelled out 7, the word 7, 6, the word 6, the76.com. You can see some great apparel celebrating a big moment for the Dogs online at the 76.com. So make sure you check that out. All right, we'll wrap up today being back in the studio again with a fun golden shoe. Our buddy Jermaine King sent this to us, and Jermaine's always very, very talented. He always has very elaborate designs, a lot of the stuff that he sends. So he writes in to say, DawgNation Daily, you've done such a great job this season that I wanted to give you a glimpse of your future. He says, go Dogs, hashtag golden shoe, hashtag go for 3 and 23. He says the future is bright. And then he has this illustration down here where it's me live from Los Angeles, but the thought bubble says the Dogs return to L.A. to attempt to win their 9th straight national championships. It's go for 9 and 29. And over there on the DawgNation Daily side of things there as well, instead of holding up the 2 fingers, he's got me holding up the 9 fingers. Maybe one of those days that'll be the case. I like that. I also like the beard there. Am I going to grow that long and gray of a beard over the course of the next 6 years? That's pretty funny stuff. But wrapping things up there from L.A. indeed. Jermaine will give you a golden shoe for that. That's really fun. By the way, I guess there's a little bit of controversy. I don't follow this all that well, but the hashtag Go Dogs is supposed to have the G on it, but it doesn't now. I think there's some upset Georgia fans about that because they won the national championship again. They're supposed to keep the G for the hashtag Go Dogs, but apparently Twitter dropping the ball on that. So we'll see if we can figure out what that's all about. But Jermaine, thank you so much for your golden shoe submission. Well earned for you indeed. Another well-earned whipping coming the way of the Florida Gators 289 days from right now. We don't know if Jaden Rashada is going to be a part of that Florida program then or not, but we do know this. All the NIL in the world won't save Florida from what's coming their way. 289 days from right now. We'll make that our Gator Hater Countdown, and we'll see all of you back here again tomorrow for DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews is one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. And I mentioned earlier our buddy Bob Tharp, going back and forth with him during the game on Monday. Dari Payro, our buddy from R.S. Andrews, was also at the game too, and they were celebrating. He was sending me pictures and things like that. I just love the fact that on our show we get so many sponsors who are like as into this as anybody else in the world is. They're at the game, they're cheering, they're going wild. So that's one that makes me proud. Now, listen, we're a business, so we'll take the money wherever we can get it. But there's something extra special about doing business with people who have, like, as much of an sort of a vested interest in the outcome as you do. So I'm really proud of that. I'll try to show you some of the pictures of Dari and them at the game the other night at some point in time. But they were getting after it in L.A. and having a great time. That makes what we do here very, very fun. All right, let me get some comments, and then we probably I'm going to go a little longer than I did yesterday because I was having to fly out yesterday. But y'all, I can't go too long. I'm tired. I'm tired. And I hate to be that way because many of you are tired as well, but I'm tired. All right, on Facebook. Let's see what else. Shelton Tucker checking in and say, I knew somehow we couldn't get through the night without seeing old Saban. Yeah, I mean, to me, and listen, I hope we never have to find out if Kirby Smart would do this. But to me, like Saban just comes across as so like beta when you're like sitting there on the desk, forced to have to be an analyst, talk about Georgia's national championship. You don't talk about the ultimate like bending the knee moment. I mean, that's it right there. When you're having to sit at that desk and when you're having to like talk about what makes Georgia so great, and like that's just, I mean, listen, maybe you don't turn down the chance to be on TV. Goodness knows Saban doesn't typically turn down the chance to be on TV. Maybe if ESPN wants you to be there on halftime, you'll just do it. Maybe one day Kirby Smart will be doing it too. But that is not conduct becoming of a great leader to have to sit there on TV and talk about how great Georgia is. That's tough. Dwayne Hudson asking about Big O coming back. No, I don't think Big O is coming back. I think that he's going to have a well-earned trip to the NFL. And, I mean, I think there's a chance he's a first-round pick. I'm not a NFL draft scout, but I think there's a chance he's a first-round pick. Jeff Ingram on David Pollack, he says he shook the legs of the throne. I mean, look, it could be that there isn't. I mean, like Georgia and Alabama could be in competition with each other, in future years. Alabama may come back and win a national championship again at some point in time. That's certainly the case. But the idea that Alabama is on top in college football, that's definitely not true. I guess it, to a degree, remains to be seen if 2 national championships right now is enough to secure the future for Georgia. I guess that remains to be seen. But what's not debatable at all is that the only team in college football that currently is relevant is Georgia. That's it. This was a season about Georgia, and it really wasn't about anything else. It really wasn't. I mean, no one was on the same page, the same plane with Georgia whatsoever. Now, maybe next year it'll be different. As I said before, I think actually three-peating is going to be a little bit more difficult than some of y'all are giving it credit for. Some of y'all are already making me a little nervous about that. But in terms of what things are right now, Alabama just isn't relevant. No one else other than Georgia is relevant. Georgia's won the last 2 national championships, and that's really all there is. Miriam Corbin on seeing some folks in L.A. So I did see our buddy Santi D. Arnold yesterday. I was finishing the show and going back to get ready to publish the podcast, and boom, I saw him right there in the hotel lobby. So I got a chance to talk to him a little bit yesterday. I didn't get a chance to see Kathy and Miriam, but Kathy did call us in on the post-game show, which I was glad to do. Clinton Thrift says that Browers is college football's version of Travis Kelce. That's a pretty good comparison. Somebody also mentioned Kirby on the subject of a mobile quarterback. He did say that a little bit on Tuesday. Killian Worthy says, thanks for what you do, DawgNation BA. I know you're tired. Go get some sleep. Rest up for the parade. I am excited about that. So I got to have some meetings today because we're going to try to figure out all we're going to do for the parade. I think we have a couple of surprise announcements coming for you on that. I am by no means confirmed to be able to say that yet, but we're going to have a big day in Athens on Saturday. I'm actually very excited about it. Very excited about it. So, yeah, I'm going to try to rest up today and get ready to tell y'all more about what Saturday is going to look like and then be there. And as I said, when our show started, my family's also secured their tickets, which I'm excited about. Nick Roundtree says, I may have missed already. What was the crowd split at SoFi? So I'm going to admit this. There were way more TCU fans than I was expecting. Now, they didn't have the majority of the crowd or anything like that, but it wasn't like 70-30 or 80-20, I don't think. TCU had a lot of fans there. Now, I also had a little bit of a weird vantage point because the press box was kind of in the corner of the stadium, and we were actually kind of closer to the TCU section. So for those of you who are actually sitting in the stands, you tell me, but I thought it was probably about 60-40 maybe. I would say there are more Georgia fans than TCU, but it wasn't like 70-30, 80-20. It may have been like, say, 65-35. How about that? Maybe like 65-35, maybe like 2 for every 1 maybe. Jeff Ingram says 65-35 for sure. Bill Sanders says that I was insider trading to get my family tickets to that. That's actually not true. I will tell you a funny story, though, Bill. So last year, my family, my wife and kids, they're trying to get tickets too, and they're not getting any preferential treatment. They're trying to get them the same way anybody else is, and so they're trying. My wife finally got them. This is a true story, and this is not anything to do with like DawgNation Daily or anything like that. Do you know that the tickets that my wife got for her and my two kids to go to the championship celebration last year were in Vince Dooley's box, like his like suite? It's like this is just a random occurrence. Like, I mean, they could have gotten section 601, but instead they got tickets in Vince Dooley's box. They didn't know that until they got there. They actually watched it from like indoors, and she sent like pictures of my kids. They're like kick back, relaxed. You know, Coach Dooley, some of his family was there. Yeah, he was actually somewhere else in that day. But the family, they were there, and it was like this wild, great experience for them that was totally random happenstance. It was crazy. This year, though, I believe they're just sitting in the general seats. Alan Verbanchik says, I heard that TCU had great fans. Yeah, the fans I interacted with were great. They were cheering for their team. They were doing a good job for sure. Kent Holcomb asking about the stadium not being enclosed. It's the weirdest stadium I've ever been to in my life because, it was almost like a carport. So let's say that I'm sitting here talking to you, and I've got a roof over my head, and I've got, wall here and wall here, but it's like the two, end zone walls, like what should have been the stadium wall on the other side of the end zones. It was completely open air. And you could feel the outdoor temperatures. It was not cold, but it was chilly-ish. It was, 50s. So it did not feel like a normal dome stadium would feel. It was cooler in there than that. And the rain was really misting into the stadium. So much so that for our post-game show, I was worried about our equipment getting too wet because cameras and stuff like that just can't get wet. And it was misting enough in there because it was raining so hard. That was like the weirdest part about this is the rain was like a torrential downpour, flash flood warnings, things like that in Los Angeles. Very, very serious weather. And it was raining hard enough that it was misting into there. But the worst part about this was the some of the sections kind of near those open ends, they're getting rained on. And the concourse area over there was really just drenched in water. And people were falling down, slipping on that. I mean, there was a lot of rain coming into the venue on those kind of edges, sort of like the end zone sides of the facility. A lot of rain coming in on that. It's very wet. There were some sections that were getting rained on. People were wearing jackets indoors because of the fact that the open air was making it feel cold. It was a very different kind of stadium. Very different kind of stadium. Philip Jordan Wells talking about me bringing back the pillow. That's right. He says, I'm going to try to get a scarf at some point in time because I do miss having the scarf. But yeah, you better believe the national championship pillow. I got in trouble for stealing it, but I brought it back nonetheless. All right, let's go over and get some YouTube comments for a moment. See how folks are doing over there. On YouTube, CJ Bulldog says that Oregon and TCU have the same psychiatrist. Yeah, I mean, Georgia starts the year off by beating Oregon 49-3, finishes the year off by beating TCU 65-7. That's pretty rough. Frank Patterson mentioning that Dan Jackson should be coming back next year. That'll be a valuable guy. Jeremy Little says, can Eddie bear the weight of these rings? Yeah, DawgNation Daily mascot Eddie here. He's going to have a lot to bear when it comes to that. Cassie Turner says, any thoughts on how to find a celebration ticket? Are they sold out now, Cassie? I hope that's not the case. I know it was going to be kind of a competitive thing trying to get those here this morning. If I hear any more about that, Cassie, I'll try to let you know. Jonathan Aaron says, with all the Jimbo money you got, why don't you just buy a cruise ship? I want to give y'all something on Jimbo maybe tomorrow. I saw an awful stat about him. I want to say it's there have been 3 times that he's been ranked in the top 10, maybe even the top 6 to begin a season, in which they finished unranked. That's not good. That's not good. Jack Laird says, do we lose Vandegrift or Stockton to the portal? Well, Gunnar Stockton's not going anywhere. I can tell you that much right now. If Georgia did have a transfer, I would say that a guy like Vandegrift, just because of the time that he spent in the program, would be the most likely. But the understanding that I have, and I know that Brock Vandegrift talked about this a little bit this week, is that he plans on being here and plans on going through spring practice and obviously competing for this job. And I wouldn't count out a guy like Vandegrift and maybe having a chance to win that. So I think for spring practice at least, you're going to have the quarterbacks that are currently on this roster competing to be that guy here for this season. Let's see what else. Yeah, somebody said they got who said they got tickets? Anson McMahon said, I waited for 45 minutes, finally got tickets in the 300s. Yeah, my wife basically said the same thing, that took her about 45 minutes to get them, but finally she was able to secure them. Brian McPhail also pointing out that Brock Vandegrift expected to graduate here this year. So while Brock has not been playing in a lot of games for Georgia, he's clearly been taking care of his business in the classroom. AKA asked about Brock Bowers being a finalist for the Heisman Trophy next year. It would not surprise me. It really wouldn't. Brock Bowers is just so good. It would not surprise me at all. And I know it's a tight end. I know that's a little bit weird, but honestly, things are a little bit different with the award than they kind of used to be. This year was obviously kind of back to being quarterbacks again. But we've seen a wide receiver win it. We've seen, defensive guy got to be a finalist a couple of years ago. There's a little bit of an opening for these kind of non-traditional Heisman candidates, and Bowers just really is that good. Now, the one thing that Georgia's not going to do is they're just not going to feed him over and over again, and that's obviously something that they kind of did on Monday, and you saw how good he can be when they do. I mean, they have one of the most potent weapons in college football, and oftentimes they just choose not to use them because they want to get other guys involved. Like the level of control that Georgia has over its season is amazing. That you've got a guy who very easily could be a 1,000-yard receiver, and yet it seems like they almost intentionally diminish his stats because they want other guys to get touches. And yet when you want to just sort of push the Bowers button, well, you can do that, and he once again showed you in a national championship game that he is unguardable, and Georgia could kind of do that whenever they need to. They sort of let him get his every now and then, but they're trying to get other people involved offensively to keep them happy and kind of keep the team chemistry high. Like most teams do not have this level of control. They can decide which playmaker gets to have the big game on the big day. It's just amazing how much of a stranglehold Georgia has on the sport. AKA also saying don't sleep on Beck, y'all. If his head stays in the game, he is really, really good. Yeah, I think that Carson Beck, if he's the one that emerges as the starter, I think he has a chance to be a very good player. I also think that the transition from a guy like Bennett, who's played so much and had so much great success, I think that's going to be a difficult challenge. I do. I think it's one of the things, if you want to ask me what I'm already a little bit concerned about for 2023, the transition at quarterback would be one of those things. Now, I'm not as worried about that as maybe other issues, because I think the one thing I've said a lot this year is that Georgia is not a quarterback-driven program. And as successful as Stetson Bennett has been and as revered as Bennett rightly so now is, that still doesn't change the fact that hey, Georgia had a lot going on in addition to quarterback this year, and next year, whether it be Beck or Vandegrift or Stockton, who ends up being the starting quarterback, whoever ends up being, Georgia will still not be as quarterback-driven as some programs are. I'm not ready to quite say this yet, but I have at least one concern for next year that's actually bigger than quarterback, and eventually we'll probably talk more about that. But I do think if it's Beck who wins the job, I think he has a chance to be very good. If it's a guy like Stockton who wins the job, I think he has a chance to be very good. Gunnar Stockton has earned a lot of buzz here during this year. A lot of praise, a lot of buzz for how he's handled his business in 1 year on the job at Georgia. And then Brock Vandegrift, I think, is still every bit the prospect I've kind of always thought him to be. I thought that Brock was great in high school. I think his athleticism, he's got a really, really valuable skill set. So it's going to be a fun competition to see who emerges in this. And I think it could be just about anybody, although you would probably say that Beck has the advantage right now because he was the number 2 quarterback. So, yeah. Center Point Media says, what's the strongest position group? Well, I guess look, what Georgia's going to have at linebacker next year is going to be really ridiculous because Jamon Dumas-Johnson's got a lot of attention, but by the end of the year, Smile Monum was playing an unbelievable level of football, And when you look at what you bring in with the freshmen, Raylan Wilson and C.J. Allen got a lot of praise for how he's working the scout team, leading in the bowl games and the national championship. So when you got Allen, you got Wilson, you got Troy Bowles, so you got this influx of young talent coming in with the veteran presence of a guy like Mondon and JDJ. I mean, I think Georgia's kind of like right back at linebacker next year to being what they were in 2021 when you had, first-round pick type guys like Quay Walker and, high-value guys like Channing Tindall and Butkus Award-winning guy like Nakobe Dean. Next year's linebacker core sort of looks like that to me. It does. And then I think what Georgia may have at the edge rusher spot next season too, which is a spot that, they need a little bit of a productivity upgrade at. That, I think, sets up to be really fun too. William Rozier says that Mondon was a beast. He was. He's one of those guys that's I love the way in which there's an underneath throw, or like let's say there's like a toss sweep type handoff play or something like that. There's this opportunity to run towards the football. I love Mondon's closing speed, and that's my favorite thing to watch about Georgia on defense is the way they're like bullets to the football. And Mondon's about as fun to watch on that as anybody is. Green Soldier says, has there ever been a defense with 2 Butkus Award finalists in one season? It's actually a good question. I'm not sure about that, but I would say if any team could, this collection of Georgia linebackers next year would have a chance to do that. Enrique Izidro on the subject of Bear Alexander, who had an amazing performance. And listen, I think that's one of those guys that gets a chance to have a big role next year in the absence of Jalen Carter. And I think that Bear Alexander has the makings of being exactly what you thought he could be when you brought him in here. Green Soldier says, I know that's a hot take, but JDJ and Mondon are both unreal. They are. And I think that Mondon's now starting to get the attention that he deserves. Pop, Jamon Dumas-Johnson, got a lot of that during the year. And now people are realizing, oh, gosh, Mondon's really, really good too. Colby says that Branson Robinson looked good. Yeah, I was happy to see him get the touchdown. Now I'll also tell you this, is I didn't see Robinson's touchdown. A lot of times in a situation like this, you're trying to get down towards the field, and I was especially trying to get down to the field here because I didn't get to be on the field last year when Georgia won the national championship, so I wanted to kind of be down there and kind of feel the confetti hitting my head and things like that. And so I was rushing down there to get in place, and that meant missing part of the game. And so I missed the Robinson touchdown. I want to go back and watch it at some point. But, yeah, I'm glad he scored, and I think he's got a bright future too. JJ asked a good question. He says, Tennessee with Hendon Hooker, Ohio State with Stroud, who wins? I think Ohio State's better than Tennessee. I do. I wonder if you all agree with that, but I think Ohio State's better than Tennessee. I think Ohio State's better than Tennessee. Anson McMahon also on the subject of Oscar Delp. Yeah, I think that Delp is going to suffer because of the comparison to other Georgia tight ends. I mean, Darnell Washington, he's pretty close to like an MVP level player for Georgia, even though, he didn't always get tons of touches and things like that. I mean, if you ask Kirby and Monken and those guys who mattered as much as anybody, they'll say Darnell. And so if it's Delp playing the Darnell spot next year, that's a lot to live up to. And obviously he comes to Georgia in part because of the success that Brock Bowers had. So if you're going to now compare Delp to the productivity that Bowers has put up, that's a lot to live up to as well. So, I mean, Oscar, he just is a part of a position group right now that's sort of setting a new standard and redefining what the position means. And on the one hand, that's like really fun and cool, but on the other hand, that's a lot to live up to. And so he's going to have the weight of expectations on his shoulders, but I agree with you. I do think he's a phenomenal prospect, and I would expect him to be a very important part of what Georgia does next season. Oscar's bigger than you think he is. It's one of those things where, like, I saw the picture the other day of Ben Watson posing with Darnell Washington. Ben Watson is a gigantic man. Darnell Washington is like just covering him in shadows. It's like they're posing for the picture, and Darnell's so much bigger than Ben Watson. The point is like Darnell is obviously huge. I'm not breaking news telling you all of that. But if you don't count like Darnell, if you say that's just something, no one will ever achieve that level of size and athleticism. Like Oscar Delp would seem like a big dude. Like when you see Oscar in practice, something like that, and he stands out. He's big. He's a big guy. So in addition to being a very good athlete, he's also going to kind of bring that size component that Georgia needs in that tight end position. I think he has a chance to be very, very good. Thomas Doe asking about Georgia missing Nolan Smith next year. They're going to miss him. They're going to miss his leadership, obviously, especially as well. One of the places, though, I'm maybe the most excited, though. I'm really excited to see what Georgia can do with the outside linebacker position next year, that edge rusher spot. I'm excited about that. Johnny Surfdog says he thinks that Jalen Carter is going to dominate in the NFL. He very well could. Woodrow says if we get Deuce Robinson in February, consider it a wrap. That tight end room will be unfairly good. Imagine the 13 personnel. Yeah, I mean, they just keep right on doing it. They keep right on doing it. They do. Cam Hasty on the subject of defensive linemen saying Bears going to be a problem for opposing defenses. I also think it's pretty significant to have Warren Brinson and Nazir Stackhouse returning. But is that official on Brinson? I mean, it'd be nice. I mean, that's one of the things we got to try to watch and sort of figure out here. I mean, I do think they're both valuable commodities for sure. Brian Whitehead did get a scarf, so I'll have to take a look at that and see if I can get one of those. Scott Harris pointing out that both Scott Cochran and Kirby Smart were parts of the back-to-back titles at both Georgia and Alabama. That's really cool. Let's see what else here at DawgNation.com. Cam Hasty on the subject of Gunnar Stockton. He says, wouldn't surprise me for Beck to be the start at the beginning of the year and then Gunnar maybe be the starter by the SEC championship game. Yeah, I can honestly say I don't know how that's going to play out. I'm just as interested as anybody to see how it does. But I take Gunnar Stockton very, very seriously. I take him very seriously. I mean, we're hearing some good things coming out of some of the scout team stuff the same way we would have heard that about Stetson Bennett after 2017. And I mean, there is an obvious reason that Beck is the favorite right now because he was the number 2. He's played. He's been in the program. And that experience that he's had over the course of the last few years, that can be valuable. It can be really, really valuable. But the job right now is you're going to be the quarterback of the team right now. You've got to take this team and you kind of grab hold of those leadership handles like right now. And I think that certainly Beck's capable of doing that. And I believe that, Brock, under the right circumstance, could be capable of doing that. And, Gunnar, under the right circumstances, could be capable of doing that too. Like, I think all of these guys have reasons that they might be followed. And ultimately, that's what – to be a leader, you have to have some followers. And I think these quarterbacks have the opportunity to kind of cultivate some of those followers here right now, to have the team start to believe in them. But even though he's kind of, near the back end of the depth chart just on the basis of the fact that he was the last to arrive, I would take Gunnar Stockton very seriously. Henry says, is there any talk about Todd Monken leaving? I would say not right now. Now, I'll also say this, and this is just me being honest, and this is also just us kind of talking out loud here for a moment. I think it's a little bit weird that even though Monken is the highest paid assistant coach in the country, Georgia's clearly had great success, I think in a roundabout way, Monken has not been as famous in football as you might think for someone who's had the success at Georgia that he's had. Do y'all agree with that? It's not like you hear people talking about Monken all the time the way they would have maybe talked about Lane Kiffin when Kiffin was offensive coordinator at Alabama. Sometimes these offensive coordinators have these huge profiles and everybody's talking about them. I don't necessarily get the impression that Monken has been discussed that way. But the performance on Monday was so dadgum impressive, where on the biggest national championship stage, you almost wonder if this kind of raises his profile more. And so, maybe he becomes a candidate for some jobs that prior to this he wasn't really a candidate for. Because, listen, there's a certain look that play callers sort of have now. It's sort of the young, chiseled chin, scruffy beard. That's the kind of sort of archetype for the play caller now in college football. And obviously Monken's, a little bit different than that. And so, maybe he's kind of from the kinds of jobs that he might want to leave for. Maybe, he's kind of suffered because he hasn't had the look of the kind of play caller type guy that everybody's salivating over. But the performance speaks for itself. So obviously Georgia fans hope they can hold on to him as long as possible. The impression I get is come back again for next year. And the impression I get is that the Georgia offense, regardless of who you plug in at quarterback or plug in place of some of these departed guys, the Georgia offense expects to be really, really good next year there as well. All right, we're going to take another lap around the comment sections, then we got to get ready to go. So Nazir Stackhouse coming back is official, which is good news. But the Brinson thing is not official, right? Let's see what else. Woodrow says, imagine what we have done to date and the talent we're bringing in. We're going to be so dangerous next year. I think it's going to be go for 3 and 23 for sure. They're going to have a chance to. They're going to have a chance to, for sure. No doubt about that. Scott Harris on the subject, the way in which Monken relates to the media. I mean, the thing about Monken is he's like as no-nonsense as it gets. And I think it's pretty entertaining. And I do think a personality like that works well with Kirby Smart. Because the way in which Monken speaks to, through the media to fans and everybody who's listening to them, that's the same way he's speaking to Kirby Smart in a meeting room too. And listen, I mean, y'all heard the leaked audio of Smart. I mean, and you've heard plenty of that before. Like Kirby's this huge, like hard-wired, driven personality. Like if you're soft, if you have a little soft around the edges, like he'll just run right over you. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that someone like Kirby is just so, I don't know, like race car in the red type thing, that if you can't handle that intensity, if you can't give that back in some way, there's a certain cadence to like mirroring and matching in a conversation that if you're not bringing a similar level of energy, a similar level of kind of gravitas from a conversation, that you just can't survive in that. And I do think that Monken has the ability to project well in a meeting with Kirby, and that's one of the things that's probably allowed him to be successful at Georgia. He's just not going to be, he's not going to be shoved around in a situation like that, metaphorically speaking. It does not always come across the same way you would expect head coaches to come across. I'm talking about Monken's delivery. I would agree with that. But I think that no-nonsense, I mean, he is not here to BS you, and he is not here to tolerate anybody else's BS. That's just the way Monken is. I think that attitude probably serves him very well while he's working around the Georgia program. I do. So Cam Hasty says, yeah, it's not official on Brinson right now. I would assume he comes back. I'd certainly hope that to be true. I'd love that to be true. He's obviously – that's a valuable defensive lineman to have in place. All right, final comments over here on YouTube. Jonathan Aaron says, I'm going to dub the recent Kirby Smart release like I did the Florida one from last year. I don't know that I could – like, this to me is the most profane thing I've ever heard in my entire life, to the point where it's like we'd have so many edits just to even play a portion of this on our show. It is really something. Now, I've also got on pretty good authority. This was not from the TCU game. That I think there's some people out there kind of pushing this as it happened for the TCU game. I have it on pretty good authority. That's not what this is from. I think the origin's a little bit unknown, but it's not the TCU game. But it is something else. It is something else. Brian McPhail said, Kirby said the scout team ran the 3.35 better than TCU. Yeah, I did hear that. And I don't doubt it. I don't. And that I think that's what C.J. Allen kind of got some credit for too. And this is not meant to be disrespect, but I would absolutely believe that Georgia's practices were more intense than the national championship game. I absolutely can believe that without exaggeration, without hyperbole. It's always a hard word for me to say. Hyperbole. There you go. Without hyperbole, I absolutely believe that Georgia practices were tougher than the national championship game. I have very little reason to believe that wasn't true. Foster Moss says, I'm ready for G-Day already. It's about to be a long off season. I get what you're saying, but I don't think it's going to be that long of an off season. I mean, listen, even when Georgia wins the national championship, I'm still sort of sad the season's over with. There is a part of me that's like, because I just love college football. I mean, I love Georgia football, but I just love college football. And when college football goes away, I'm always a little bit sad. But, y'all, we're going to have a couple of weeks of chatter about, what happened here. Then you're getting close to Deuce Robinson making his announcement. You got, National Championship Parade on Saturday. We're going to have some really fun roster discussion coming up. A lot of these guys are going to find out if, so-and-so's a first-round pick and so-and-so's, a lot of these Georgia guys are going to have big NFL draft nights coming up. Spring practice is really only a few weeks away. I mean, it's not – it won't be that long again until we're in the 2023 season. So I get what you're saying, and it always feels like the offseason for college football is so long, and compared to most sports it is. But we're going to have plenty of stuff to keep us busy because I have a feeling Georgia may not be quite done the transfer portal yet either. So keep that in mind. Jalen Jackson says 2 names are going to dominate as freshmen, Raylan Wilson and Jordan Hall. The Wilson one thing, I could see that. Hall is a freshman defensive lineman. Of course, I guess Barry Alexander did this year. I know they like Hall a lot, but, boy, that's a lot for a freshman defensive lineman. But maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Foster Moss says, I don't know what to do on Saturday mornings, no game day. Now, I will tell you that. Sometimes Saturday mornings are a little hard for me just because you are so just used to that, like you said, watching game day, 9 a.m., or just that sort of regular game day routine. Those first few Saturdays without college football is very hard to figure out what's going on. I would agree with you on that. Very hard to figure out what's going on. Taylor Russell says, how do you feel about those extra long seasons due for development of the overall team from year to year? I'm guessing this long one that Georgia's been on is probably really good for young players. I'm guessing it probably is very good for young players. I'm guessing that's probably really good. Mitch Monteith says Monken for governor. I would say he would have a very good chance of being elected for some sort of office right now. I would say that's the case. Octavius Oliver says that Gabe Harris will come in ready to play. I could see that. I absolutely could see that. I think that Gabe Harris is a very interesting player. Bill Sanders also says Friday nights are hard for him with no high school football. I would agree with that there too. So that's all the case. All right, let me get ready to wrap up by saying this. That if you go to ajc.com/dogsnews, you can get so much of the really cool memorabilia, including like the framed edition of the field edition that we had on the field there on Monday night. Some really fun stuff. Now, this is not going to last forever, so you got to get in there and do this right now. So it's ajc.com/dogsnews for more on that. It's ajc.com/dogsnews for more on that. And you can be a part of a really, really great event. I also want to give you one more thing here. I think I may have a chance for you to get this here too. So I just got this. All right, so tomorrow they're going to do a drive-by sale at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium parking lot. So if you want to get one of those field editions, like the regular field editions, they're going to do those Mercedes-Benz Stadium parking lot tomorrow. Let me see if I can I can't open this right now, but I'll tell you more about that. But tomorrow, AJC, the field edition is going to be sold in person there at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium parking lot. So we'll see if we can promote that, get the word there out on that. But that's obviously really exciting. So a lot of folks want to get their hands on these commemorative field editions to celebrate what was going on the field on Monday night. So wherever you are, ajc.com/dogsnews, the place you can go to do that. Or if you're in Atlanta tomorrow, Mercedes-Benz Stadium parking lot, and we'll try to get more information for you up on that there at DawgNation.com. So that's the story. Also, R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Find them online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. But you got to find them online at rsandrews.com. So y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Back-to-back Dog National Champions. Go for 2 in 22. They did it. They got 2 in 22. And we're going to keep on celebrating with all of you on that tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp, and our R.S. Andrews Cool Down when it's all said and done. Have a great day, everybody.